Hello. Today I'm going to tie for you two parachute dry flies, one with an extended abdomen, and the second we'll do all on the hook. And these are large dry flies meant to imitate the green drake, which should be happening about this time in Pennsylvania. The extended version will tie on this 305 size 12 dry fly hook. We're going to use a 2 millimeter craft foam for the abdomen and wrap that with some superfine dubbing. And you'll see we're going to use a needle to kind of put that first part together. And I'll use moose body hair for the tail and the darker shell on the back. And then we're going to rib that with a strand of that yellow floss. So I'm going to use a combination of the polyfiber for the post. And this is kind of a light grizzly, but I'm going to shade it with a yellow marker. Hackle, and then we're going to hold it all together with some 8/0 white uni thread. So to get started, I've done a 2 millimeter square of that foam, strip of that foam, and I've rounded it off and darkened it with a lighter. And we're going to attach the thread to our needle. We have a needle in the vise. And leave a little bit of the point show. I'm going to put the tip of the thread, the waist end of the thread, back in the materials clip. Not sure if I need it later or not. And we'll just get that foam kind of tied down to the needle. That's a little shorter than 1/2 inch. I think you can, these flies get really big, so you can make this as long as you need to. Um, and we put a couple of wraps there at the end around just the needle to keep it from wanting to roll on us. It will, but we can kind of keep it in place. So I'll go back and I'll leave just that darkened tip showing. And I've wrapped back and forth over that foam, trying to reduce its volume by about half. I think one of the goals here is to um, kind of thicken the body, and then that foam also gets to expand and kind of pull the thread wraps tight at the end. So when you're done dubbing and you're done ribbing, that and we slide this off the needle, that foam's going to want to push out in all directions and kind of firm things up. So we got some of that creamy colored superfine dubbing. And I'm going to start and work my way towards that's actually the tail end of the abdomen. Realizing here that it's probably going to take another layer. So I kind of faded away while I wrapped more of that dubbing on the thread and built a second layer so I can get a little more taper into the abdomen. But I do want to finish back here by the tip. So I like the looks of that. I'm going to take that piece of, it's a single strand that was 4-ply floss, and I just took a single strand and folded it around the thread. And you'll see it slide up here in a second, and we'll get it under the thread in one spot, get a couple of wraps just to hold things in place. That'll also go in the material clip. And now the moose hair. So a couple of points here. It takes probably 10 to 12 strands of moose hair to darken the upper side of the abdomen. Now, we all know that mayflies have 2 or 3 tails, usually 3 in this case. Sometimes one will get broken off. They also, sometimes the tails are longer. In this case, I just kind of stopped there. That looked good to me. I'm going to put a little drop of super glue to kind of put things in place. I have that little bundle on top, and it's okay to go back in later and trim out a couple of those tail fibers. If you like only 3 or maybe 6, you want 2, 2, and 2, that's all okay. So here I'm going to capture both ends of that floss in a pair of hackle pliers and hang it over the bobbin cradle. So we are going to use the rotary feature to spiral over the moose body hair and you'll see that in a second. So I get that first turn. Have things looking pretty good, and then we start to rotate. I'm going to space these wraps out. Um, these are pretty big bugs, and the segments are pretty big. I think the actual go are bigger near the actual tail end of the abdomen and kind of get smaller as you go, but nice wide stripes are what we're after here. So I get about 4 or 5 turns, make sure that moose hair stays on top. And get up near the front. Now we can get our floss and get it kind of free of everything. Now I have some Sally Hansen's hard as nails there. I'm going to just kind of give that a coat. And off camera, maybe I should have zoomed out so you could see this. I've got my shepherd's hook in the hackle plier, and I'm giving it a little spin to kind of bundle that up. And the other thing here, I think I wiped off a little bit too much of that Sally Hansen. So I want that to kind of attach itself to the thread. I'm going to spiral that, rib that in the same location as that thread wrap. And I kind of want to glue all that together. So here, I could have used the rotary feature again. I didn't. And we followed the thread wraps, and we have it up front. We'll put a couple of turns to hold everything in place. It's not a bad time for a whip finish. If you have a medium or a large whip finisher, it kind of comes in handy, so you can do the that whip finish up there at that end. Clear all the body and the tail. So I'm going to come back with a little more Sally Hansen's over the thread wraps. I'm also going to coat that moose hair with Sally Hansen's and let that soak in and dry as well. Alright, so I did all that and I kind of faded away and gave it a chance to dry. And you'll see it slides right off the needle. So that foam facilitates that part, and now we have essentially a finished abdomen. So I made a couple of those, and now we're ready to tie one to a hook. So this is at Lively Legz 305. It's a size 12, and it's got a nice wide gap. I like the point on these. It's barbless, and it's got that little extra beak on the front that I don't know, it looks like it would hold on to the fish a little better. So I start a thread, work my way to the back, and I'm going to put a little ball of dubbing back there and something to kind of soak up a little super glue. We're going to attach that extended abdomen to this hook, and we want a little foundation for it and something for the glue to soak into and keep things from rolling around on the hook. So I made a little thread ball. That'll kind of kick that abdomen up in the air a little bit. It soaks up the super glue. And we'll get a few wraps around it and start to pull tighter as we go. If you pull too tight too soon, you may cut something loose there, so be careful of that. And I turned it a little bit, and I'll kind of wrap my way through everything and keep working forward and bind it down nice and tight. And we'll just come in and clean it up, snip off all that excess. And we'll cut this stuff off nice and close and kind of wrap back over it. You can see that dubbing and the super glue and thread wraps all have that body kind of in place and kicked up a little bit. And of course that little stub of deer hair underneath is going to bother me, so I have to get that out of the way. So here I have that, and again, if you've been following me, this is the sulfur color from a shoelace, which I'm pretty sure is some kind of poly, and some macrame cord. I think that's what the gray is. And we got that tip from Charlie Craven, and bought that in bulk at a craft store. But the combination together and brushed together, it, I don't know, it roughly imitates the color of the wings on these bugs. They vary a little bit, and feel free to substitute or do different proportions or whatever it takes to match the bugs where you are. So I'll do that, pass the bobbin around above to build my post. And again, I think if there wasn't a camera there and I've only got about 5 or 6 inches to work in, if you could just go wild and pass that around quickly, this all goes a lot faster than it looks. So we've got the post, there's our hackle, again kind of a light gray grizzly. I have that Sharpie yellow accenter highlighter, so I colored that hackle and set aside to dry, and I'll put a little dab of Sally Hansen's on the post and we'll let that dry. And I catch myself, I don't think I use glue to excess, but I don't know. When you're watching it, there's everything seems to be glued into place. So here we are. Bring the hackle in. We'll tie it in front of the post, nice and tight to the hook. Work our way back a little bit. And then I can stand it up and wrap it around the post. So again, if you've been following me lately, this is going to be similar to the way I've been tying parachutes. I've been wrapping the hackle up the post, and then when I wrap the hackle, I start at the top and work my way down. And then I've got kind of what I've developed as my standard way of finishing these parachute flies. The other thing, and I didn't think I had an opinion on it at first, but I've been trying to flip the hackle so the cup side or the underside of the hackle faces the post. So when you fold it down and wrap it, the fibers tend to, um, I guess, extend up more than down. And I think that makes a cleaner fly. I don't know that it matters in terms of how it floats or how it looks, but um, I actually didn't have a preference and sort of developed one. So we'll come in with a little more dubbing. And when I say a little more, this is a big fly, so this is probably not what in most fly tying is a little bit. Yeah, it's just cream. The top of these bugs tends to be darker, but the part the fish sees is cream colored and hangs underneath. And I don't think I have enough bulk there yet. So we'll come in with a little more dubbing. And we'll put a little more bulk in front of the post. Tighten up the end, and then I want to finish that last wrap around the post in the direction that I want to wrap the hackle and in the direction that I want to tie it off. So we like what we see. Again, this is kind of my new way of doing parachutes, and not so new, but maybe what I've settled into, my standard way of doing it. And I like to wrap over a little bit of that. It's just thicker Sally Hansen's head cement that doesn't seem to get all soaked in. But it was in another bottle, it got a little thick, and rather than thin it down, I've been using it um, for very specific purposes, kind of like this. And that may have been a little bit of extra glue there, but it won't hurt. So I'm getting the hackle wrapping from the top down, trying to get a good 4 or 5 wraps, one just under the other, and come down nice and tight to the body. I'm trying to avoid that big wide thread band between the thorax and the hackle on these. So this is what led to some of the way I'm doing this now. So we're going to get about 3 or 4 thread wraps and kind of zigzag it through the hackle so I don't trap too much down. And then this is the other thing, and it's off camera in this one, but you'll see it later. I'm kind of using a half-hitch tool and wrapping in reverse so that it pulls from the back side of the fly across the top and then down around the hook eye. So my half hitches are actually kind of going in the opposite direction here, but that's to put the thread up on the top of the fly and under the hackle. So in this case, and I don't always do this, but in this case we'll straighten it back up in the vise. And I'm noticing there's a little gap. That hook wasn't closed perfectly. And in this package, a couple of these hooks came that way, but what I'm trying to do there is just do several double half hitches. And I probably could have changed direction here. It wouldn't have hurt. This is just for bulk, but I'm trying to fill in that space behind the eye. And the hazard there is if this was tied to your tippet and it got, the tippet kind of got wrapped around the back side of the eye. If there's any sharp edge showing there and it's not covered with thread, um, it's going to damage your tippet, potentially cut it off. So that's why I'm going to the extra trouble here. And I do it in the second fly. I do too. I do a couple of extra half hitches, just trying to fill in that gap. And while we're at it, why not one more? I think the other thing we're noticing here is that uni thread is got a little wax on it, and it sticks to the half hitch tool. So you kind of have to um, wrestle it off the half hitch tool to pull it tight. But there we are. We sliced off the excess thread, dividing up that post a little bit. It didn't quite brush together perfectly, but I think it'll get the job done. And we'll gather it all up. And I like to come down at from the top, kind of flatten it out a little bit, and see if we can imitate that shape of the wing on these green drakes. So that's essentially the fly. I've got a couple of hackle fibers trapped down on an angle. I'm going to have to snip those out. And I'm kind of primping there, but you can see I tug on the tail pretty hard and nothing gives way, and I think this is fairly durable. I've carried a half dozen of these flies for almost forever, and hoping someday to be in that epic hatch on up on Penns Creek or something. So there we saw quickly the TMCO. It's also a size 12, but it's I think it's 1X long dry fly hook. And we'll put one of those in a vise. Now, the idea here is to do the same fly, same materials, but I'm not going to do the extended abdomen. And this, to be honest, I think if you're filling a box, I think this is a little easier to tie, and um, you might want to do this instead of fooling around with needles and chunks of foam. Um, However, I am going to use a chunk of foam here to kind of fatten up the abdomen on this fly too. Big fly, big hook, and I want some bulk. So I'm going to zigzag across a bunch of this foam and kind of do the same thing. So snip off the excess. We'll get a pinch of that superfine dubbing for this one. And make a noodle. And again, in the short workspace that I have here, it's going to take a couple noodles to make it look the way we want, but and we'll give it a couple of twists to tighten it as we go. And so while we're dubbing, and this is again the boring part, um, when it comes to imitating the green drake or large mayflies, this is kind of a cool pattern that I kind of like, and but there are others. If you look up Alan Gretchen Beatty, they do some humpies, they call them. They're done with all poly. But if you do a long, I have a couple in a box. I should have pulled them out and put them on this video. But if you do a long shank version of their poly humpy and use a darker poly for the back, you kind of get the same effect. And I'm fairly confident that you could full trout up on Penns Creek with that in the middle of this hatch. So um, you don't have to do what I'm doing. So there we have another bundle of moose hair. We evened it up and tied it in, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to spiral forward and kind of pull it down over the top, let it darken the back. And we get to the front and tighten up the wraps and hold everything in place. Another good place for a whip finish, just to keep things from unraveling. Going to use the rotary feature here. Don't have to, but you can. And same thing, capture both ends of that yellow floss with the hackle pliers. Give it our coat of Sally Hansen's. And with the shepherd's hook, and like I said before, I should have backed out and kind of show you what I'm doing, but I'm just twisting it up a little bit. And we'll just follow that thread wrap and kind of let that floss weld itself in place and make the segments and the stripes and help hold down that moose body hair. And there we go, 4 or 5 wraps, and kind of like that. And we'll tie off the end and snip off the excess floss. And my tail got kind of pushed down there. A couple of those fibers aren't going to cooperate, so I'm going to shield your view with my thumb here and snip those out. I guess if I could look at the camera and what I'm doing at the same time, I would have realized that it Would have been more exciting for you to watch me snip those off, but uh, you get the point. And same thing, a little Sally Hansen's across the back, and use a dubbing needle to kind of make sure everything gets covered. And we'll let that soak in and dry. So there's another combination of the gray macrame cord and the sulfur color from the shoelace. Again, they're both kind of a polyfiber, and they work great for these posts and for different things around the fly tying bench and shucks, um, shucks on some of the merging patterns. But I like them for the swing post. So same thing, we'll pass the bobbin and wrap up a little bit, work our way back down. And put a wrap or two around the hook shank to kind of save my work there. I had too much yellow in one place and it was kind of bothering me, so I picked away at it. Not sure I fixed it. And same thing, little Sally Hansen's, the thinner stuff, let that soak in and firm up the post. And there's that light Grizzly hackle. And I'll tie it in around the hook shank in front, work my way back, and work up the post there and kind of pull it in place. Now here what you'll see is, I was talking about putting the cup side toward the post, so when it wrapped, and I didn't quite have it the way I wanted, so just unwrapped, and you can kind of jockey it around, and I pulled it to a new spot on the shank, went around on the other side of the post, and now it's facing the way I want it, and I'll just wrap it in place right there instead. I think this is a tip that Charlie Craven was trying to show in one of his videos, and I didn't quite get it until I had to do it here and was paying attention. So um, thanks, Charlie, for that. And if that's not what you showed me, then sorry, that's my version. And we'll come back with more of that superfine dubbing and make another noodle and fill in a lot of that space that's there. I guess the other pattern, I was going to mention this forward, that or earlier, was that you could use to imitate the green drake, and I think it's more, they do it more out west because they use more hair and heavier hackles, but they'll do like a grizzly wolf pattern, and if you do it in the right colors, uh, I guess it imitates their green drake. I don't think their green drake's exactly like ours. I read one time that they're actually a different species, and I don't know that I ever wanted to actually master entomology. I just kind of want to use the same like size, shape, and color bug that the fish are eating, and um, I don't really have to say its Latin name. So another pinch of dubbing and kind of fatten things up there in front of the post, and there we are. The last wrap will come around the post, again in the direction that we want to finish. I'm going to move it in the vise. And we'll find that thicker head cement and put a little dab on there. Okay, so I got what I wanted. The fibers and the cup is kind of facing up. I think that helps with trapping fibers. You don't trap as many hackle fibers down. Not sure any of that matters. I don't know that it floats any different. It's just not as photogenic at the end if you trap too many hackle fibers. But I don't think the fish care a lot. So there I put 3 or 4 wraps around. We'll do our half hitch tool from the bottom up, opposite direction, same as before. I am zoomed out here so you can see what I'm doing a little better. Uh, if the thread slid off the half hitch tool, I'm sorry, a little easier, I think I would do 3 wraps instead of 2, but I have to kind of tease it off there because it's got a little wax on it. So, all right, so we like that. The eye of the hook sufficiently closed with thread in the back end, and we'll straighten it out in the vise and trim everything to shape. And again, if you want these to look a little more green than yellow, that Sharpie's the one I had, but I think I could have rounded up a green Sharpie, gave it a little green tint here. Could have mixed the dubbing a little more and changed the color there. I kind of like what we did with the wing, maybe a little more gray, a little less yellow. And same thing, we want at least the body length, and I like to give them a little angle. Snip that one stray one out of there. I think there's one other one. And there you have it. If you're lucky enough to be on Penns Creek, and don't forget to put a little head cement up there where the half hitches were. But if you're lucky enough to be on Penns Creek in the next week or two, and you're in one of these epic hatches where these things are coming off like crazy, the trout won't ignore them. I think this pattern would work, and or some variation of it. So here we'll zoom in a little bit, but here's a picture. So we have them side by side, so you can see the extended body. If you don't want to bother with that, you can tie it all on the hook. I'm not sure one would be more effective than the other, but happy to share what my thoughts are on this. And if you hung in there till the end, you want to learn more about me, look me up on Amazon. And until next time, be safe.